the Blast from Our Past Network.
Hey everyone, co-host Corey here. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. Without you, Podcasting After Dark would not be possible. If you would like to help the show grow, please consider signing up at patreon.com/podcastingafterdark. You can also support the show by purchasing one of our awesome t-shirt designs on our merch store at podcastingafterdark.com, or by picking up a copy of 7 Winters Alone by David Irons on paperback, hardback, or Kindle. Just search for 7 Winters Alone on Amazon or click on the link in the show notes. A free way to help out is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those reviews are huge for us and really helps get the show in front of new listeners. Again, thank you all so much for the love and support you've given us over these past few years. It really means the world to us.
Welcome to our Patreon-exclusive interview series for Podcasting After Dark with your hosts, Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Tonight's interview is with the director of Manborg, Father's Day, The Void, and Psycho Goreman, Stephen Kostanski. Steve Kostanski, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Corey and I host Podcasting After Dark, which is, a podcast that breaks down some of our favorite movies from the 80s and early 90s, typically more in the horror, sci-fi, dark comedy genre. But and then I thought, I want to get on somebody who I feel is like the future of this genre. And when you agreed, I was so excited. And then obviously COVID struck and then we were like, oh crap, what are we doing now?
I mean, it's kind of the perfect time to nab people for podcasts because it's like we're all stuck at home.
Yeah,
so
what are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you so you're in Toronto right now, right?
Yes, I'm in Toronto. I'm still able to work a little bit on shows and stuff from my apartment. It's just a lot of I guess Zoom calls, but it seems like everybody's got a different program that they're using now.
Yes.
Like every single producer I talk to, it's like, oh, we're using this thing called Blue Jeans, and it's like, oh, cool. Now
Blue
I gotta
Jeans.
load another app on my. Yeah, it's like it seems like all these like studios and stuff, like they have their own internal things that they like commit to. I don't know if they're being paid by these companies, but yeah, it's like every week is me discovering some new program. And even for this, it's like loading up this thing. It's like another thing I gotta like figure out. But this one was relatively painless.
Okay, good. that was our intention. I think apps.
Yeah, this was nice and straightforward.
Okay, good. I think apps have become the new hoarder's paradise. Like instead of clutter in your house, you have clutter on your devices. Of like all these random apps that you don't even use anymore.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then there's no room on my phone to take pictures or do anything. I think
right?
Yeah. Everyone's lives now is your phone telling you there's no space for storage.
it's the conspiracy of the world, man. So
yeah, exactly.
So we're really excited to have you on the show and discuss your career and all that good stuff. I'm blown away. In our research of kind of digging deep into your background, just the projects you worked on have been so eclectic, and I love. I'm a fan of it all. So again, thank you for being on our show. But I have to say, like, I cannot wait to kind of get into what you're working on now. But let's kind of go back to the beginning of your timeline. How did you get involved in filmmaking?
I mean, as a kid, I was always making stuff, like sculpting things and building stuff out of junk. My parents kind of gave me the best of both worlds. My dad's very technical. He worked at Manitoba Hydro back in my hometown of Winnipeg. And so he would just bring like old junk home from his work, like circuit boards and stuff, and be like, "Here, play with these."
Nice.
And my mom was very is very artsy and crafty, and likes to paint and always making stuff. So she was kind of getting me on board like the more creative side of things. So I would just kind of noodle at home as a kid, building stuff. I'd build like shitty robots that wouldn't work. It's basically like that part in Simpsons where it's like where Marge is like, "See, Homer, that's why your robot didn't work." Like it was like I was building these things that were totally impractical, but they look cool. And I didn't really like kind of put it all together into like the package of filmmaking until my dad actually moved one of our VCRs into the basement, and I suddenly had free reign over what I could watch at any time.
Nice.
And so I would obsessively watch whatever we had like taped, because like I grew up in an era where my dad was all about renting movies and then taping them.
Yeah.
So then we could
Yep.
just kind of watch as many as we wanted. So just watching these like shitty dubbed copies of movies, like watching Robot Jocks over and over again.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
And the movie that I actually started breaking down like effects and kind of like the whole process of movie making was actually Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Really?
Because the movie is so clunky
Yeah.
in its execution that it's actually like a great film school. And it's also it's like colorful and fun enough that it like is like a 12, 13-year-old like kept me engaged. But I was also old enough to understand what like I had reached that cusp where I started to figure out like what a bad movie was. Like, when you finally go to a theater and watch a thing and go like, huh, that Spawn movie wasn't really what I wanted it to be, I guess. Like,
Oh, Spawn was so
you like
disappointing.
reach that, you reach that point where movies just like everything isn't the most amazing thing ever anymore. It's like you start to figure it out. And so it all kind of like culminated in me figuring out like the process of making movies and special effects, and just kind of like how that all merged into this package. And I realized like, oh, I'm already kind of like making stuff out of clay, and like I had like a bit of an interest in animation. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna like maybe go in this direction now. So I started really pursuing stop motion animation first, because my logic as a kid was that nobody in my age group were capable actors. And so I figure like instead of trying to convince people to like act in my movies, I would just do stop motion, and then I would have total control over the scenario.
Yeah.
So I back then we didn't have a digital camera yet, so my dad got me rolls of Super 8 film that I would use in his old Super 8 camera. So I started doing stop motion on Super 8, and not understanding cameras in any way. I didn't realize that the exposure on the camera was set super low, so I'd spend months animating things, and then I'd send the film off to get developed, and it would come back, and we'd set up a projector and a screen, and I would go to watch it, and it would just be like a blank, like a black reel of nothing.
Oh no.
So I would just waste like months of my time trying to animate
Yeah.
just to get no result.
Oh no.
Which I
I
mean is
imagine
like,
there's no better teacher though than that.
Yes, I was just gonna say.
yeah. Oh yeah, crippling disappointment is like the most important lesson in filmmaking,
Right?
because you're going to encounter it every step of the way. Like in every project, you're going to have that sinking feeling of like, oh no, like maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. And so that was like a good kind of like initiation into that emotional process. And so after that, I just kept doing it until I finally got it right and figured out how to crank the exposure. Could have read a manual, I guess, but I didn't feel like doing that as a kid.
Where's the fun in that?
So-
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's no sense of wonder and discovery in reading a manual. Everyone knows that.
Yeah.
I
didn't learn to
So,
program
yeah,
my
I
VCR that way. So
Yeah, exactly. Trial and error is the way to do everything in life. So I started making like animations that were a little more watchable. So I started submitting them to there was like a local film festival that would play locally made short films. And so I was doing that for a few years, like through high school, I was doing that, just kind of like animating shorts and shooting little video projects with my friends. And eventually, this jumping ahead a bit, this all leads up to around 2006. I had met Adam Brooks, who's like another member of Astron 6. He was a friend of a friend, and we were hanging out in our mutual friend's basement. And I remember our first hangout, he was teaching me all the like the history of trauma movies and why I needed to get on watching those. And so we kind of struck a friendship, and he convinced me to submit one of my animated shorts to another local film festival called the Winnipeg Short Film Massacre. And that was where all the other members of Astron were also submitting films, and we all kind of met up at that festival because Adam was submitting shorts, Matt and Connor were submitting their shorts, and Jeremy and his girlfriend Jen were actually running the festival. And
nice.
So the five of us met and were sort of competing at first, but then realized we all had similar tastes, and like we were a very eclectic group, but we all kind of seemed to have a similar thought process when it came to making our movies. And so we all teamed up and decided that we would help each other. So the next year, all our shorts, we were involved in all of each other's short films that we had made, and we decided to have like a banner, like a VHS, like Vestron type logo at the beginning of all our short films.
Nice.
And that's how Astron 6 came about. And so, we swept that festival, and then basically all the subsequent festivals after that, and became this little filmmaking collective that just was constantly working on
total domination.
Yeah,
And
we
it seems
dominated
like
Winnipeg, Manitoba.
Nice.
It seems like the Astron 6, sort of like you said, like a collective. It's kind of unique. You don't see that too often in the film community.
Well, it really felt more like just a bunch of guys who all wanted to make their own things, but then also really liked what everyone else was making and wanted to help out.
Yeah.
Like that to me was the golden age of Astron 6, is when we were all making shorts at the same time. And you got like so much variety in the kinds of things that people were making, because we all have our own tastes. And just being able to like know that my movie would have like, it'd probably star like either Adam, Matt, or Connor, and have music by Jer, and I would do the effects on everybody's movies. Like everybody kind of did something different and brought something different to the table, and it was just nice to know that like you had talented people on your side, and people that would like kind of force you to be better as well, because we're all very critical of each other, and in the interest of just making the best things possible. So that was really the golden age of Astron 6, was when we were all making shorts simultaneous to each other, because we just, it felt super productive to be involved in so many things at once. It's really like the ideal situation for a creative type, especially like me, where my attention like wants to go in 5 different directions. Like I have trouble focusing on just one project. So the idea that like I could be like sculpting a creature for one of my movies, and when I'm bored of it, I would just go off and like do some effects for like Adam's short that he's doing, or go and like help out on a shoot for Matt and Connor. And like just having variety, I think, was what made it so fun and interesting at the time, and just kept things fresh and exciting. It's a dynamic that I've never really seen anywhere else.
No, I was going to say that typically when you see a team of filmmakers or musicians or any sort of artistic endeavor, it's often like, oh, we've known each other since we were kids, or oh, we went to college together. You guys kind of culminated around the same time that you were all creating your art, and I love that you said that you challenge each other at the same time. You're critical, but sounds like in the best way, because that's what's going to get you the result on screen. And obviously, like with movies like Manborg and Father's Day and BioCop, I'm a huge fan of Manborg, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You know, the result is it speaks for itself. And what I love is though you're rooted in, you have this love of like schlocky trauma, comedy, horror, sci-fi hybrids, you tend to pull out like the best elements of that in a way, because there, as much as there are,
definitely,
there are great Class of Nukem High, Toxic Avenger, you know, Tromeo and Juliet perhaps, but there's a million other terrible trauma films that dig even deeper. But then when you shouted out Robot Jox from back in the day, like Robot Jox was kind of, in my opinion, ahead of its time, and then there was Crash and Burn and Robot Wars, which kind of followed after those. You obviously, I love that your team like has created so much kind of original content.
Yeah, I mean, we're all bursting with ideas, that's for sure, and a lot of it just comes from us like riffing endlessly on stuff.
That's great.
Like, I feel like at least everything I've made is me like watching other movies and like, you know, that group experience of watching a movie where you're like talking through it and like ripping on it and talking about how it could be better. Like, I feel like stuff like Manborg is totally born out of that. Because it was actually one afternoon I went and hung out with Jeremy and we watched Eliminators and Shogun Assassin. And that was when he pitched me the title Manborg, because in Eliminators the cyborg guy is Mandroid, I think.
Yes.
And so he pitched Manborg as a joke, and I have a real problem with doing this where like I get fixated on one stupid idea and I just don't let it go.
That's
like,
great.
You know, a melting cop that just wants to die and people won't let him. Like, I have to follow these things through to their in my mind logical conclusion. I can't just be like, oh, that was a funny riff, now to move on with my life. It's like, no, I'm going to spend 3 years making this movie called Manborg because that makes sense in my weird brain for some reason.
The Eliminators is pure trash, by the way, in the best way. Like, Corey and I actually are big fans of those post-apocalyptic, weird wasteland type movies that were born out of probably much better sci-fi stock.
All the Italian Mad Max ripoffs, like Warriors of the Wasteland, or 2019 The Fall of New York.
Yeah, that's great.
They're all great. But Eliminators, I actually watched it again. That's a good one. Wheels of Fire I watched recently and actually was pretty good. I was surprised. But to go back to Eliminators, it's like I find watching movies like that are a good creativity boost, because I get so bored in them because they're so slight.
Yeah,
like they never really live up to the poster, and I think that was just the style at the time, like in the 80s and early 90s. Like, it's the full moon syndrome of like, we have like great promotion and like 30 minutes of movie that we've stretched out to 70 minutes.
Well, yeah, that's
and
what.
So you have a lot of time to sit there and like think about like what you would do in this universe.
Well,
and,
Charles Band would
Eliminators. Yeah, exactly. And so Eliminators, especially like when you're, you know, in the midst of that boat chase, like wondering when it's going to be over, it's like that's when the brain starts to drift and starts to come up with other ideas. So, I mean, you can fault the movies for being a little slow, but I think it does help inspire at least my creative energy.
Well,
it's almost like it's a part of your meditation process. It sounds like.
I just need to have that stuff on, like, in front of me, like flashing through my brain, I guess, to like start triggering those ideas. Because not to like jump way ahead, but like for my next movie, PG, it was the exact same thing where I was watching Rawhead Rex and I was getting real bored.
Classic example.
And just
Yep.
like how can I like take this idea of like an ancient like godlike monster and make it actually fun?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think there is merit to these movies not fully delivering on their promises, because then it should, hopefully inspire someone to figure out how to take it to the next step.
It's funny you say Rawhead Rex, because I remember when that came out and everyone said, from the mind of Clive Barker, Hellraiser. and you're like, okay, it's going to be the next Hellraiser. It's got a big monster in it. It's going to be great. Then you watch it and you're like, wait, how long is this? I call it, I've coined a new term recently called the Ginty syndrome, based on Robert Ginty from Exterminator. And because Corey and I talked about Exterminator on Podcasting After Dark, and broke down that movie, and we said, what is the fascination with this guy? He's really interesting. He has this kind of lull, hypnotic, put you to sleep energy, but yet you want to keep watching more of him. So
yeah, like a more recent movie that tapped into that energy, I thought, was Panos Cosmatos's Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Yes. Oh, totally.
Which it's like so slow.
Yes.
Like painfully slow. But I love putting it on because it gives me that same vibe of just like you're kind of hypnotized a little bit.
Yeah.
By the style and the aesthetic than by anything like plot related. Like sometimes you just want to sit in that world and not be bombarded with plot. Like it reminds me of that era before we were so focused on appealing to foreign markets, where it's like we have to overexposit everything. Like it's like exposition to the extreme, where like in modern movies, characters are explaining things like 5 times just so that everybody on the planet gets it. Whereas I feel like something like Eliminators doesn't really like, there's room to have that exposition, but they don't really use it because they're just kind of focused more on like tone more than anything. And so I feel like there are benefits to not just filling your movie with dialogue.
Yeah, Beyond the Black Rainbow
are a good example.
Beyond the Black Rainbow was one of those movies too where I was so excited because I'm a fan of like Phase 4, and I feel like it has a little bit of Blue Sunshine in it, and I love those movies from back in the day. And then you put it on, or in a little bit of Strange Behavior, like Dead Kids, with the idea of going to like a this center to be hypnotized or whatever, and then you put it on and you're like, okay, if the sound was off and we were having a party visually, it's got that Fulci, like, oh, I just want to watch it and I don't need to even know what's going on kind of aesthetic. And then if you just want to sit down and actually grasp it, well, it'll put you to sleep really quickly, and which is not necessarily a bad thing, but maybe not.
Yeah, no, like I like putting weird stuff like that on late at night as I'm falling asleep, because I feel like it leads to stranger dreams.
Yes.
And just like kind of lulls you to sleep in a fun way.
And birthing something
kind
like
of
Manborg.
Yeah, like my new obsession is that app Tubi. Which I feel like is the video store from like the early 2000s that I've been missing so much, where it's like it still has a lot of the holdovers from the 90s and 80s, but there's also just a lot of like early 2000s trash, like unwatchable trash, like Boa versus Python level, like Asylum stuff. So it's like a good mix of just everything like pre-streaming era.
Yes.
And so I'll just pick like movies at random that maybe I've seen on like Best of the Worst or something, and be like, oh yeah, I'll just put that on, and it's like time to watch Project Metal Beast. And it's the closest I've gotten to that feeling of going to the video store and just like picking stuff at random and being like, well, this has a weird cover, like this will be fun to watch with my friends tonight.
Yeah,
so
the heyday.
that's what I've been busy with during quarantine is just scouring through Tubi to find what movie I'm going to fall asleep to.
I love it.
I've been singing the praises of Tubi to everyone that can listen because it's just the best collection of just, yeah, like you said, crappy cult movies from like the 80s. And we had to review Night of the Comet. And of course, because of the quarantine, my Amazon was delayed. So, but Tubi was to the rescue. I could actually watch it on there. So I was like, all right, cool.
So
well, I'm glad Tubi finally allowed me to watch Mutant Hunt, which I think was I don't know if Empire Pictures produced it, but I think maybe it was like an acquisition of theirs.
Okay.
Because it feels almost too cheap for Empire. But yeah, that's a movie that boy am I glad Tubi exists just so I can witness things like that and have it just readily at my disposal, because it delivered on that poster's nonsense promise of
I
a
was just gonna
cyborg
say,
man with a long arm.
yeah, it's got a great poster, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, okay, well, at least it's got that. So
At least that happens in the cheapest ways possible.
right.
But
So I wanted to get back to Manborg though, in regards to cyborg and influenced movies. You said that took you 3 years to make.
well, it was about a year to shoot it because it was just like on and off on weekends.
Okay.
Like that was back before I actually knew the like structure and process of making movies. So I was just like, I'm going to shoot this scene Thursday night and hopefully people are around. And like that would just be every week. And so I was, I think I was finishing up university at the time. So I kind of had a little bit of leeway to shoot stuff and not be too bogged down by work. So yeah, it was kind of just a slapdash process of shooting whenever I could. And we shot in the basement of a store that sold blinds in Winnipeg. They just had like this big empty basement that they loaned out to me.
Nice.
So I threw up a green screen and just threw a bunch of junk around and started shooting. So yeah, it was like a pretty fun, crazy process, just making all the costumes and stuff myself and all the props. And yeah, just doing it bit by bit by bit for a year. And then it was 2 years of teaching myself After Effects because I didn't think that, like I didn't plan ahead for how much work it would be to do all the miniatures and all the like compositing and stop motion that was required. It was really poorly thought out. If I had known it would take me that long to make it, I might have scaled back a bit or been a little more efficient with my filmmaking. But at the time, I just wanted to make the biggest, craziest thing I could make for no money at all. And so, yeah, that's what I did. That was the hell I put myself in.
Well, you put yourself in hell like the war in the movie, you know. But I was going to ask
exactly.
you. I was going to ask you if, and maybe you're not familiar, but Captain Power, if that was any sort of influence on you at all with the.
Oh, of course, I love that show.
Oh, cool,
I
cool. Nice.
Actually just pulled out the DVD set not too long ago to rewatch.
Oh yeah, with the awesome Drew Struzan art on the cover.
Oh yeah, I love that art.
Yeah.
One of my like crowning achievements of my career, I think, was when we did the Manborg comic book. We actually got
Nice.
Gary Goddard to sign off on putting an ad for Captain Power, the DVD set, in the comic book.
Oh,
so
cool.
I feel like those worlds collided perfectly, and yeah, that was like kind of the payoff to me for the whole movie was kind of having his approval on that. But,
well, I don't.
yeah, I love Captain Power.
That
awesome.
is so cool that he gave you his blessing, so to speak. But and I love that. Like, and I was saying that earlier. Your movies don't feel like parody in a way, and it's like proper homage, and it doesn't feel like you're ripping off. It feels like you found that nice middle ground to be heavily influenced by something from your childhood and your youth, and make it your own, really. And I think that's why to me your movies stand out.
Well, I really feel like for this stuff to work, you have to filter it through your own sensibilities.
For
like
sure.
I think a lot of like filmmakers that lean into homage and pastiche a little too much, like it's just a copy and paste process. Like I I rip on Stranger Things a lot, and I'm gonna do it again because I feel like there's so many moments in that first season where it's just like I feels like they just lifted a thing out of something else, and we're like,
Yeah.
here you go, here's a thing,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, but you just took that from Nightmare on Elm Street. Like there, you didn't enhance it, you didn't take it and put your voice on it. It's just like we needed a thing here, so we just took it from something else. And I never want to do that. I always want it to be like my spin on an idea, like a pre-existing idea or a collection of pre-existing ideas, and the process of like kind of filtering it through my own imagination, my own perspective, gives it a voice. And I think that's the most important part, is like you can't lose your voice. Like I always want to feel like you're watching a movie with me and I'm like commenting and twisting and contorting the like narrative in front of you. And I never want the like any of the homages to like overtake that. Like they're not as important as the story I'm trying to tell. So yeah,
that's
story first.
Mission accomplished, because you know, and I want to jump a little bit ahead to The Void, because I feel like while in many ways you executed that perfectly, in my opinion, because you're watching this journey and you're saying, oh, that reminds me of this a little bit. Oh, that's cool. That reminds me of this, you know, scene in Prince of Darkness or whatever. And then but you're able to do it in a way where you're like, no, this doesn't feel like I'm rehashing. And yeah, it's, you know, throwing up a can of Coke like in Stranger Things and going, see, this is 1985. You know, we're taking it back, kind of thing. And can you talk
exactly?
Can you talk a little bit about the process of making The Void, especially with the fact that you didn't do it alone, you co-directed?
Yeah, Jer and I made that together, and it was definitely a case of us wanting to not be labeled as just like homage throwback filmmakers.
Yeah.
Even though that movie is inspired by classic horror, the idea, our like mantra going into it was like, we just want to make a good, scary, dread-filled movie, and it's more just a coincidence that all the movies we think are scary and dread-filled that have the techniques that we admire are like they're all movies that predate like 1990. So it's,
well, that speaks
like
for itself.
It's kind of like how it's kind of like how people call like creature effects, or like, oh, that's like old school. It's like, I don't really think that makes sense. It's like, no, it's just the right technique for the job.
Yeah.
Just like I think like if you shoot a movie that looks like The Shining, I don't feel like you're being like old school. You're just making a movie that looks like how a good horror movie should look. You know, like,
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
like there's techniques established that lead to a good result. And I feel like modern filmmaking has gotten away from those techniques. So why not just kind of like take a few steps back and reassess, kind of like, well, what's actually going to get the effect that we want? And so with The Void, it was like going for a more deliberate, dread-filled atmosphere that was getting away from all the stuff that we were seeing at the time. Like we were really against like trying to do anything that feels like it's like a Conjuring or an Insidious type movie. Like,
yeah.
At that time especially, I was so sick of the like family moves to a house and there's like a ghost in it.
Yeah.
Scenario.
It was everywhere.
Like
everywhere.
I was so bored of that I was, and that's not even to say that I don't like those movies, because I like a lot of them, but I want variety in my film selection. And so I also want to aim for something that's just maybe a little off the beaten path, and not just like, because especially in film, like marketing, and anytime you talk to like producers pitching projects, it's always the conversation of like, well, like what's out now that it's like that we can like kind of tether it to.
Yeah.
And so with The Void, we didn't want to do that. We didn't want it to be like, here's a movie that's just like something you're seeing in the theater like you saw last weekend. It's like we wanted to make a thing that made you go like, oh right, I missed these kinds of movies.
Well, you had said
kind of like contain. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was going to say that Corey and I both watched your the making of as well, which first of all was so fascinating to watch, and you made a comment about how when you're trying to come up with a name and you were thinking about the fog, and it made me, in watching your movie, reminded me of Carpenter in that way, where his movies were not just another movie that was like something else that year. In fact, you could look at his body of work in the 80s specifically and say nothing compared to what he was doing at that time. And so making your film at the time when everything was, a someone using a handheld camera or a monitor in your bedroom and picking up a ghost, or someone's bones cracking and their head spinning and you're like, whoa, what's going on? This kind of, which I'm not shitting on those movies either, but what I appreciate, and Corey and I both appreciate, is the fact that your movie it just felt so fresh, and had those elements of like, oh yeah, finally something different that I can kind of trip out on.
Yeah, exactly.
Different yet familiar.
Yeah, well,
which
that's
is
what
interesting.
You want a little bit of that comforting familiarity, like just a little hint of it. And I feel like even Carpenter's stuff has that. But
yes,
and I'm sure all the stuff that he makes, like he has all his influences in all of those movies.
Yes,
but he's never just copying. He's still like putting his voice into it. And I think that's the key with everything that I've made, and especially with The Void. We wanted to have kind of our unique perspective, mashing my sensibilities with Jeremy's sensibilities, and you can definitely see those like at odds throughout the film.
Oh, really?
Which I think it makes ultimately for a more interesting movie. I feel like the conclusion of that movie is like a very Steve conclusion.
Okay.
And I feel like the buildup of the movie is a very Jer buildup, where Jer's more into this maybe is not the most accurate comparison, but might simplify that logic a little bit. Is like Jer is more the David Fincher, and I think I'm a little more the Sam Raimi, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where it's
totally.
like, and I mean, maybe Sam Raimi's not accurate. Maybe a little more like Don Coscarelli.
Oh yeah, nice.
Where it's like, I like more like fantastical stuff, and he likes grounded, gritty realism more. And so like, I think those two sensibilities are always fighting with each other through the movie.
So you're basically
again,
Phantasm 2, right? You're what you're saying is you guys are Phantasm 2, because the first half of that is like kind of this kind of action mystery set piece, and then at the end just explodes into gore and mayhem.
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely in that realm. Though
Nice.
I'm sure Jared would get mad if I compared The Void to Phantasm 2.
Oh,
probably he'd be okay with more Phantasm 1.
Okay,
I think
no,
we're
I
both
dig
on
that.
board that one being the best one.
I
Just because, I mean, I think it fits tonally more.
Yeah.
Just because 2 also is like a bigger studio movie.
Yes,
And
for
1
sure.
is still kind of a gritty, low budget thing, which is what The Void definitely is.
Oh, no doubt about that.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
like
interesting that you mentioned the budget. My brother-in-law, I showed it to him, The Void, for the first time for him this week. Zach and I had seen it before and everything, but it was, obviously wanted to revisit it. And we live in this day and age where we're kind of aware of what the budget for movies are and everything, and you kind of go into your viewing of these movies with these background knowledge. And I'm going to paraphrase just a smidge, but when we finished the movie, he was quite impressed with just how big the film felt at the end, with, knowing that the budget wasn't, billions of dollars like a Marvel movie or something. Yet you guys pulled off this just incredibly huge concept, and pulled it off extremely well too.
Yeah.
And then tonally, because obviously him and I discussed, the movie afterwards, and, we both you can see the influence, you can feel the influences and stuff. You can feel Prince of Darkness here and there, but it's always your own. Like it's always The Void. It's like the void, you can see its inspirations, but it's its own film. It inhabits its own world. And by the way, fantastic world building too. As someone who's a big fan of world building, I love that movie. But yeah, it's just I love the fact that you can taste the differences, or not, you can taste the influences in the void, but it's still it's its own taste at the end. It's its own movie, but just the scale of it is absolutely impressive. What was the inspiration for that, just that end, shot, that we all know about with the, the otherworldly area?
When we set out to make it, it was like very much we wanted to convey, like, I feel like cosmic horror's become kind of an overused term recently, but at the time it wasn't. And so we were, saying we wanted that kind of cosmic dread that I feel like we were drawing more from literary influences, because there's not a ton of movies that really gave us that sense.
Yeah.
But just that sense of like, just to endlessly bring up Phantasm, I feel like that movie like conveys that really well.
Totally.
That kind of isolation and sense of impending doom. And so that was like an idea that we like really just wanted to hammer home through the movie, and the idea of ending in like what's essentially like the money shot of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was always something that we wanted to have happen, like that kind of like big, almost like Twilight Zoning moment of just realizing how insignificant we are in the universe, was like a theme that we really wanted to like have hit as the last image of the movie. Like that's what we wanted people to walk out of the theater feeling, was just like that overwhelming sense of dread.
And it was
like
super
with, like,
effective.
Just a little, it had like a little smidge of hope to it at the end with them holding hands, like just a tiny bit, but still like enough impact that I think it like kind of conveys that vibe that we wanted to have for the movie.
Yeah, them holding hands is a much, even if it's a small thing, it's a lot nicer than like say The Beyond, Fulci's The Beyond, which kind of has like which I love. I love that ending. I love that moment in Prince of Darkness where you see her on the other side of the glass. It's like I love these little glimpses, and man, yeah, like you said, the money shot in the void at the end. It's so perfect because it's what you're left with at the end. So now it immediately makes you want to go and rewatch the movie with like sort of that knowledge in your head. It's kind of a great way to force people to go and rewatch it like almost immediately.
Well, and I was going to say,
I was just going to say, it's like always interesting to hear people talk about the movie because like their impressions of it, because for me and Jeremy making it, it's like we knew all the mythology going in, and we knew how it was going to end. So it's always interesting hearing how people react to this stuff, because I feel like the reactions to the movie initially were very mixed, because some people, it seems like they weren't kind of prepared for it to go in those directions. And like you were talking about world building, it seemed like that didn't work for a lot of people too. Like they seemed to be thrown off by not having all the answers, understanding that.
I like when you don't have
this kind of story.
Yeah, it's nice to have like actual gaps to allow the viewer's imagination to go wild with. But I think the reason it works so well, and what I love about world building, is when the creators, you guys, know what all the answers are, but you're not giving them to us, but yet there's no contradictory evidence in the movie. So meaning like you guys follow your own logic, and I don't care what the logic is, as long as you follow the movie's logic for it. And I could tell that it was oozing with world building to the point where I was like, cool, I want to like a comic book backstory, just a little bit more, but if I don't get it, there's enough fun there, enough room there for me to feel satisfied and for my imagination to go buck wild with it. So it's a fun movie. And we posted about it on Instagram before we did the interview, and it's, I don't know if it's building up more steam as it's getting older, but it has a very strong following online.
Yeah, it really does.
Well, I discovered doing the like kind of festival tour back when it came out. I think North American audiences were looking for more of a like midnight movie. Like I think they were expecting it to be more slapstick, but going like when we did our kind of Europe tour for the movie, it seemed to click a lot better, and people seemed to embrace what you were saying, like the kind of like world building aspect of it and not having all the answers. And it seems like now that time has passed, it's kind of found its place kind of in the horror community. Because, yeah, you're always fighting expectation with people. And it's like you go into a movie with like this preconceived idea of what it's supposed to be. And when you don't get that, that equals a bad movie, apparently. So I think giving like time has been kind to the movie, because people I think have there's definitely people who like really responded to it at the time, but I feel like it's more people have kind of gotten on board what it is and what it's trying to accomplish.
Well, I think you could lump that into, if you look at movies from the 80s, and I love that you brought up Phantasm, and you can keep bringing up Phantasm all you want, because it's one of my favorite horror films of all time. But in this idea that it gained popularity as it got older. And I think nowadays our audiences are typically like, well, if it didn't hit me over the head in the first viewing, then it's not a good movie, or, and then there's nothing wrong with something aging more with time,
Yeah, there seems to be an attitude of like just being the first person to give your opinion on a thing.
Yep.
And less about actually considering the thing. Like I feel like traditional film criticism has totally gone out the window.
Yeah.
Like the Roger Ebert era,
Yep.
I think is long gone, and now it's like people just need a thing to post. So
yeah, that instant gratification.
And it's not so much about like actually meditating on the movie a little bit and like seeing how you feel about it. That's, I don't know. It's like becomes pretty thankless as a filmmaker. Like kind of watching that play out, even when it's with other movies, like the way things have become so polarized into either like it's the best movie I've ever seen, and if you don't like it, you're an idiot, or it's the worst thing I've ever seen, and if you don't like it, you're an idiot. It's become so like politicized.
Yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit.
It's almost like even just like the discussions we're having right now feel so antiquated, because it's like, a calm, like polite discussion about movies, whereas the online community typically doesn't seem too on board with that.
No.
So
and
our audience
people like it's snarky. People like they're snarky, and that seems to like what always sort of gravitates towards the headlines is snark and negativity. Actually, Zach and I, whenever we do review our movies, we really try to lean away from any kind of negativity. We'll obviously call it out when we see it, but we try to delve into what we love about the film, because at the end of the day, and we can all talk about what we hate, but let's actually like talk about what we love. I do want to gush for one quick second when you said that a lot of times the void it wasn't what people sort of expected and everything. And I remember when I first saw it for the first time a few years back, when Zach and I watched it together. The funny you say that, because it was literally everything that I wanted it to be, and was like hoping it would be when I saw the trailers, and I was like, I hope it goes there. Wherever it goes, I want it to go there, and I hope it goes big. And honestly, I was like, oh my, like it hit everything that I wanted it to hit, and was scared that you guys wouldn't hit. So I just wanted to add that. Not really a discussion point.
Well,
just wanted to throw it out there.
No, see that. But that's what I mean is like that's a thing I've kind of grown into understanding as a filmmaker, is that you can't connect with everybody, and you should really just appreciate the people you do connect with.
Yeah.
Like, because it just means there's like-minded people out there that get what you're doing, and a lot of people who don't get it either. So I mean, you can't like take every criticism to heart necessarily. It's like not every movie is for everybody, and
not every movie has to be like a a Disney, like, you know, a Marvel movie that like has to make like $1 billion like overseas or something. Like this movie, The Void, sits happily, you know, on the shelf, you know, and people look through my Blu-ray collection like, oh, what's this? And it's like, it's one of those movies that you're excited to kind of like show people that. And you know what? I mean, there's a place for those kind of movies. It doesn't have to all be mega budgets and everything.
Not everything has to be a 4-quadrant movie. And
right.
It seems like, unfortunately, that's just the direction that filmmaking and TV is going. And it even was doing that back when we made The Void. There were so many stupid hoops that we had to jump through just to get our vision on screen, which honestly, like, this will sound crazy, but Jared and I like set out to make what we thought was like our version of a contained movie that was like more contained movie, like smaller than what we were used to, and a more accessible movie. And I feel like we made the opposite on like in both those regards.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I mean, that just shows where our heads are at when we think of something as a small movie. It's never small. Like, I don't think I'll ever make a movie that's like 2 people in a room having a conversation. Like, there's going to be a monster somewhere, and maybe it'll be on fire. I don't know.
Well, speaking of monsters, I do want to talk a little bit about PG Psycho Goreman, because you were slated to premiere that at South by Southwest, right before everything.
Yes, yeah, it was the most wonderful timing of a pandemic ever.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, over my film career, I've had so many like left turns and had so many wrenches thrown into the mix. Like, even just on The Void, like, it was easily like the most soul crushing and like mentally crippling experience Jared and I have ever had.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So
that making of docu kind of explored that a little bit. So.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more to that story. I feel like maybe when the wounds have totally healed, Jared and I will put the whole thing out there.
Please do. Love to see that.
Yeah, someday. So yeah, when the South by Southwest got canceled, it was like, oh, okay, like, whatever. You just
We've had worse.
We've had worse. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm just happy like the movie is done, and I think it's great, and I'm excited for the world to see it.
Your trailer is phenomenal. That looks so damn good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I think that's what kind of got me excited to reach out to you in the first place. Is I told Corey, I'm like, we need to get Steven on our show because this looks like it's going to blow up.
Well, it
does look awesome.
It is definitely not The Void. I will say that much. It is maybe it's not a very serious movie. It's probably the most purely Steve movie you're ever going to get.
Nice.
But yeah, it's a movie I don't even know how to summarize. It was born out of my love of the trope of like villain becoming the hero, a la like T2.
Yeah.
And yeah, just kind of like playing with those tropes and like kind of kids adventure movie tropes and kind of turning them on their heads, and also my love of like Japanese monster movies and like Sentai shows and like Kamen Rider, and I'm a big Guyver fan. And
I was gonna say I sense a lot of some Guyver in that trailer.
Yeah.
I love Guyver so much, and just that kind of like creature suit action horror fantasy is a thing that nobody is making outside of Japan right now, and it baffles me that there's not anything like it. Because Power Rangers was a big thing when I was growing up, and it was like my window into that kind of like series and movie world that I didn't even know existed. Like, I also loved like Godzilla movies as a kid, and so this was me kind of like working out all of those creative urges into one movie. because it's a lot. There's a lot of shit in this movie. I don't think people are quite prepared for what they're going to get.
That is the best summary you could do for it. There's a lot of shit in this movie, and I don't think people are ready for it. That's the best. That's all you need to say.
It's like it's funny because it's the same as something even like The Void. It's what similarity it shares, where like where the movie starts is not where the movie ends. The movie ends
That's great
in a place you will not expect, and I think it's got lots of weird twists and turns, and a lot of heart too, which I think is important for a movie like this. It was important to not just make it a pastiche of stuff. Like there's a story and there's, characters that you care about, and some really great performances. And it's just super fun movie. I'm very proud of it. And I feel like however it gets out there, people are going to see it eventually. The film festival thing doesn't seem like a likelihood right now, but to be honest, I'm like kind of bored of that world anyway.
Okay.
I want people to see it however they can. So worst case scenario, it'll be on Shudder or Blu-ray or I don't know, at a drive-in or something. Like we're still figuring all those
coming
details
back.
out. Yeah, well, I think it might be a viable option because they are becoming more popular. And I mean, when I'm reading about like what was that horror movie, The Wretched, was like number one at the box office because it played a couple drive-ins.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That seems
phenomenal.
like that's like a great story now for those filmmakers to have. So
you can slap that on
that.
You can slap that on the cover of a DVD or Blu-ray and be like, "Hey, we were the number one movie."
Yeah, exactly. So why not capitalize on that? But we'll see. Like we sold it U.S. rights to RLJ and Shudder, so there will be like physical media at some point, maybe the fall, and then Shudder after that. So it will be on streaming.
I just love, and I'm gonna come back to Phantasm again. I just love how.
Please do. I watched Phantasm 3 and 4 this morning, so we can talk Phantasm all day if you want.
Well, I was just gonna say that I love that Coscarelli. Mike is such a great kid character, and I always loved how kind of real and grounded he felt in that first movie, and how just his dialogue just felt so original, and how Coscarelli also, he made a movie called Kenny and Company, which came out in 76, I think. Anyways, you can get that off of Netflix, their physical system, in the discs form still, which is great because you can't pretty much find it anywhere else. But that was when I was first kind of introduced to Michael Baldwin, and I was like, this kid is so cool. And then you go into this world, and I feel like, when you're talking about kind of going overboard or going into the void, so to speak, when Reggie's getting pulled into the other dimension, and you're like, well, what if he got sucked in completely? And that was the ending of the movie, but I love the way it ended anyways. And I love all the endings of the Phantasm movies, because going back to letting the audience kind of figure out or fill in the gaps, that is, Corey and I always talk about how much we love that, especially with Carpenter, the way he ends his movies. And you're like, wait, well, what's going to happen next? And I actually talked to John Carpenter years ago about that, met him at a Fangoria convention, and he's like, well, I want to leave it up to you to decide. And Coscarelli kind of feels that same way with especially with the Phantasm franchise, of like, what's going to happen next? We'll just have to see, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, like Phantasm 4, the ending of 4 is like, Oblivion, that's the real ending to me, because I like that question mark so much of Mike on the ground dying and Reggie being like, I'm coming right back for you, and like running off like through the tuning forks. Like, it's just such a great climactic moment, because I feel like those movies are all about hopelessness and like the inevitability of death. And I feel like in that moment they've lost, but Reggie isn't giving up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just has like so much weight in that moment of the idea of like what is he even going to do against this like unstoppable force that just you kill him and he just keeps coming back, and there's no that we have been given no sense that he can be stopped in any way. But the fact that Reggie just like so committed, like cares about Mike so much and like keeps pressing on is just, it has so much like punch to it.
Yep.
In a way that I feel like horror movies especially don't typically have. Like that's why I gravitate towards stuff like Phantasm more than anything else, because I feel like it has actual emotional weight in a way that like other like slasher franchises don't really carry with them, you know?
No.
Like I feel like there's more drama to chew on in those, and I don't know, I like it. That's just, you know, different strokes for different folks. Like maybe other people like get that out of Jason Takes Manhattan, but for me it's like, no, it's all about Phantasm. Like that's like the series that has the most to it, I think, like the most depth.
I totally agree. I feel like at one point, you know, there was always discussion back in the day, well, what if Roger Avery took over and he was supposed to make his version of it, and then like I think a comic book came out with his version of it. I'm trying to remember back.
Yes, actually I have the comic. Coscarelli actually signed it for me because we shared a table at like our Rue Morgue Festival of Fear years and years ago.
Nice.
But yeah, it's like, I think it's sort of based off of that original idea for, wasn't it like called Phantasm 1999 or something?
Yes,
or like Phantasm 2013. I feel like it changed titles a couple times, but the one where the premise was like America's a total wasteland, and there's like kind of like these kind of fortified strongholds, and they're like traveling through like destroyed America to get the Tall Man, and he's become this basically like god figure.
Yep.
But yeah, the comic, from what I remember, kind of follows that premise, and it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's something I wish there was more like spin-off stuff like that. Like I'd even take like books or anything just in that universe, because I just find it all so interesting. And I what I like about it is it does the thing that we tried to do with The Void, which is like every answer you get to a question you might have just raises more questions.
That's
like
great.
I like how in Phantasm 4 you like find out who the Tall Man is.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually answer the question of who he is. It's like, oh well, that was his this was the like starting point of him becoming this like evil force, but it still doesn't explain like what happened to him. He just kind of walks through the tuning forks and comes back, and he's all of a sudden like possessed by evil.
Yeah.
So I like that still leaves you with something to dwell on while still advancing the story a little bit. So I feel like it straddles that line of like giving you bits of interesting information, but also like raising more questions at the same time.
Oh, no
So,
doubt.
yeah.
I will tell you too, if you're able to, I don't even know if it's out there on eBay or whatnot, but if you can track down the paper book novelization of Phantasm, the original, there's a little more exposition in the story, and it's a cool little read, especially if you love the series.
I think I might have to track that down.
Yeah, I might.
I want it.
Maybe I'll scan every single page and I'll send it to you in a PDF. So there you go.
I mean, it might be something. I wouldn't be surprised if some fan out there didn't already do that, but I will track this down. I also just, being a completist about Phantasm stuff, I kind of want to just get it. So
yeah, you should.
No price is too high.
Look, I mean, Corey knows my love of Phantasm. There's a guy named, his company's called Attack of the Clay People. He makes like clay resin figures of horror and sci-fi characters. And he did, for a time, he was doing custom figures. So I had him make a Reggie and Mike. Sweet. And yeah, like with the, you know, and I was a huge fan of Phantasm 2's weapon choice, like with the 4-barrel shotgun. And so he made like the 4-barrel shotgun for me and everything. So, you know, I've got a little son who is not old enough yet to watch those movies, but he knows that because he's big into weapons, and he's like, "That's cool." I'm like, "Yeah, we'll talk about that later." So, but
well, I feel like Don Coscarelli has pointed out how important iconography is
Totally.
in telling your stories, and I feel like he is such a master of creating these images that you just immediately latch onto, like of like an ice cream man with a 4-barrel shotgun. Like it's just
brilliant.
such a classic image to me.
Yeah.
Like even their car is just so like
the
cool
Hemi-Cuda?
and
Come
memorable.
on.
Like everything about it, like it's like feels so specifically tailored to like stay in your brain. Like it feels like there was that like nothing was just casually decided. Like it feels like all the images in those movies are very deliberate, and to me that's like real craftsmanship that I think a lot of low budget horror doesn't put the effort into. One more thing before we go back to not talking about Phantasm, but when I was like in my early teens, and this idea of like another Phantasm movie seemed very like unachievable, I actually started building stop motion puppets because I was going to attempt to make like my version of
cool.
like the Phantasm 1999 story.
Yeah.
Because I was just so into the mythology of it. I was like, oh, I just want to make it, and I'll just make like a little tall man and stuff, and like I'll just animate this thing. And it proved to be way too daunting, so it never happened. But it was a thing that I was like mapping out as a 15-year-old at one point. So yeah, that's how obsessed I was as a kid.
Do you have any photos from that still?
I don't think anything survived. Like that was all back in Winnipeg. But yeah, it was definitely something that was like loosely in the works for a period of time before I realized that it was totally unachievable.
See, this is speaking to Corey and I, our own personal feelings on just horror and sci-fi and pop culture in general, like making your own versions of the things you love so much because it wasn't coming out. So you're like, I'm going to just do my own version.
Oh, trust me, like me and the Astron 6 guys, like we've had many discussions about like wanting to just make our own Friday the 13th movie because it feels like it's never going to happen. I mean, I feel like there's lots of fan films for that out there because he's like one of the more achievable characters to build, but like, that like feeling, it's such a like specific to like the horror genre feeling of like, you just want that thing so bad that you're just going to go out and make it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely feel that about a lot of franchises. Like we're in kind of an unfortunate time, I guess, Halloween being the exception, but it's like there's not really a lot like all these franchises I grew up with that I was all like excited about, like, oh, I'll start making movies and I can be a part of these. Like they've all just kind of like stagnated or they're just on hold perpetually, and it's like a little disheartening that all the stuff I grew up on is just like stuck on a shelf and people aren't doing anything with it.
Yeah, that franchisability with movies just kind of seems like it's gone by the wayside at the moment.
I guess also
horror.
The straight to video market doesn't really exist in the same way anymore. Like, I mean, the ideal time for me to be making movies apparently would have been like late 90s, early 2000s, and I probably could have like jumped on a Hellraiser straight to video sequel at some point. Like that would have been a fantasy come true for me.
Yeah.
But it's like that market, I guess, just isn't there. It's like, unless you're making a thing that you're going to like, you're planning like the next 10 years of what it's going to be doing. Like, it seems like it's just not going to happen. So that's
I think
really
I think you're creating a potential franchisable character in PG. I know we talked about it a little bit, but I can't wait to see this movie. It just looks so bonkers, and the fact that you said, it goes even more crazy than what we've seen in the trailer. I cannot wait because it looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
you had me at Guyver.
Yeah, it's all that stuff mashed together. It's a pretty pure distillation of like what's going on in my brain most of the time.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, it's whatever that means, good and bad. It's all on screen. So
I think we're gonna
hope people like it.
I think we're gonna have to have you back on our show when we do our watch list, because Corey and I have this offshoot series where we break down like our top 5 of something, and I'm thinking we need to have you back on for like a top 5 obscure or like Avco Embassy best films or something.
Ooh,
like
sweet.
that.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, what am I working my way through right now? I just did, like, because of Stuart Gordon's passing.
Oh, yeah,
I rewatched a bunch of his stuff, and man, that guy has an excellent filmography that I feel like everybody should get on. Like, he is the master of taking not a lot and making something out of it.
did you watch
I
King
think
of the
he's
Ants?
very underrated. No, I haven't. See, this is the thing, is I haven't touched any of his, like, I guess, would it be post-Fortress era stuff?
Yeah.
Or post-Space Truckers. I kind of stopped at Space Truckers, which I really liked. I think his sci-fi stuff is super underrated.
Oh, totally.
Like, Space Truckers and Fortress and Robot Jocks are all great.
Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
think
like
people,
King of the Ants, was it Stuck? I haven't seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did he do one? Was it Edmund?
Yes.
Called, I think. Those 3 I have not seen, and I'm planning on, like, kind of marathoning those at some point soon.
Yeah, King of the Ants
is like
is really good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear they're all good, so I want to, like, give them a chance. They just seem like leaning a little bit more into, like, kind of the drama world, and I was more in the mood for
Robot Jocks.
Robot Jocks and Pit and the Pendulum type stuff.
Oh,
so,
yeah, and prisons, futuristic prisons and whatnot.
Oh, yeah, sci-fi prisons and Intestination and all that good stuff. I love it.
We are.
Yeah, I would definitely come back for something like that.
Yeah, dude.
Nice.
Look, I mean, Corey and I would be equally honored to go down that road with you. We will. Okay, well, you heard it here first. We're gonna make it happen. But we're almost out of time. But I wanted, first of all, your story is inspiring to us because I love that you're doing what you love. You're making it happen, regardless of how hard, how challenging, but
how miserable it makes
how
me,
miserable, how depressing. No, but thank you.
No, it's a soul crushing industry, but it's very rewarding at the same time. I can't complain. I get to make monsters and direct monsters for a living. Like, I should not complain about that.
It's badass. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being on our show. It really was a lot of fun. I mean, my God, I can't wait to rewatch The Void again, and Manborg and Psycho Goreman is coming out this fall. Cannot wait to see it. I will gladly spend whatever I need to own a physical copy, because physical copies are where it's at, in my opinion. Cannot wait to do that. But thank you for being on our show.
Yes, thank you
very
much
for having me. That was a great time.
Cool. We hope it wasn't too painful.
No, not at all. Again, it's like I'm sitting at home noodling on some stop motion stuff, so I got time right now.
Well, be on the lookout for our watch list pitch to you. So
yeah, for sure. Keep me posted. That would be great.
You got it. Thanks so much, and stay safe and healthy in Canada.
Yeah, stay safe up there.
You guys too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Talk to you soon. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Podcasting After Dark's exclusive interview series with Stephen Kostanski. And, as always, thank you for your support.